Welcome to week 7 of youth ministry in the local church, and I hope that you've enjoyed this semester. We got this week and then week 8, and we are done. And I've enjoyed being in this class, and I've enjoyed teaching you and things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something and found value in what we've learned about youth ministry over these last several weeks. Well, we're going to jump right into the content today. The content today is entitled Handling Pressure, Projects, and Time Demands. Now, in ministry, I want you to understand something. You're probably super excited about planning sermons and planning events and taking students on retreats and mission trips and camps and working with curriculum and all that. And that's a big part about what you're going to do. But for you to experience longevity in your church and in your ministry, you're going to need to figure out how to handle some of the pressure of ministry and some of the projects, all the things you have to do, and the time demands that come on you. When I was first starting out, I started out in youth ministry full-time in 2007. I worked part-time a few years before that. And what I found really quickly was that I was at a smaller country church in North Carolina, and I get that some churches are different, and we've evolved, and churches have evolved over the years. But truth is there wasn't a lot of respect for my time in that church. And I loved the church, but here's the truth. They just assumed I was a 24/7 employee. So it didn't matter if every Saturday of the month I was busy doing church stuff. It didn't matter if I was working Monday through Friday and every evening was booked with something church related. And so my point is this: I had to learn quickly how to manage my time and how to handle some of those pressure, because you're going to view people, you're going to go home after a long days of work, you're going to want to spend time with your family, and you're going to get phone calls, you're going to get text messages, you're going to get emails, that you're going to have to figure out how to handle that and how to respond to it. So letter A on our notes: how to keep from burning out. Burning out is something that, if you were to look at some of the most prominent church leaders out there, they talk about burnout. I think of two in particular. Years ago, Perry Noble, who was the pastor at New Spring Church at the time, he actually talks a lot about burnout. Wrote a book called Overwhelmed, and it really, really shook him about burnout. And so this is a real thing. Another one is Carey Nieuwhof. If you listen to his podcast, he's a pastor in Canada at Connexus Church. And if you listen to his podcast, he talks a lot about burnout and how ministry burnout is a real thing. And there's a lot of people doing ministry who are currently burnt out. And so here's what I'm going to give you: some thoughts on how to keep from burning out, okay? And this is if you're 21 years old, this is if you're 30 years old, this is if you're 45 years old. It doesn't matter. And so this applies to all of us. And I encourage, if you're young and you haven't started out in full-time work, start some of these things right off the bat. Get them a part of your life, and I think it'll help you. So how to keep from burning out. Number 1, remember the at your age principle. The at your age principle. Now, I can remember I put so much pressure on my students to perform. And especially my student leaders. And I know that sounds terrible, but here's the truth. I viewed them as student leaders, so I expected them to act, like leaders, like adult leaders. Here's the truth. No matter how far they are in their spiritual journey, they're still teenagers. They're still teenagers, and they're going to act like teenagers. They're going to do things that are going to frustrate you just because they're teenagers. You're going to have some of your best, most core kids disappoint you because they're teenagers. And you have to remember they're going to act their age. So students will act their spiritual age, not yours. So don't try to put them and the expectations you have for yourself on them. They're going to act their spiritual age. What a 14-year-old spiritual kid is, that's how they're going to act. And you have to remember, they're going to act their age. They're not going to act yours. Don't place your adult expectations on a teenager. Don't place your adult expectations on a teenager. So you should expect a lot from your student leaders, but don't expect exactly what you're going to get from your adult leaders and your seasoned veterans. Because they're 16, 17 years old. They're not going to be all the way there yet. And you got to understand that. They're going to do things that are going to just frustrate you. Number 2, don't feel the need to be liked by everyone. Now, if you're like me, I like to be liked by everyone. I just do. It's natural. And I think everyone, to a degree, enjoys that. But listen, you cannot be a good leader and be liked by everyone. Let me say that again. You cannot be a good leader and be liked by everyone. It's just not possible. You're going to make decisions that people are not going to like. You're going to try to follow Jesus and do a certain thing that people are not going to like. So don't feel the need to be liked by everyone. Make decisions, be confident in who you are, and be confident in the calling that God's placed on your life. Number 3, practice saying no. Practice saying no. Everybody say no with me as you're watching this. No. Here's the truth. That word will save you a lot of burnout. Okay? It'll save you a lot of stress if you just can learn how to say no. Sometimes you got to say no to a text message at night. Spend time with your family. Sometimes you got to say no to an email. Sometimes you got to say no to a meeting that you just don't need to be at because you know that you have a lot of things going on. Sometimes you need to say no to certain trips. Sometimes you have to say no to a good idea because you have a better idea. And here's the truth. When you say no to certain things, that means you're saying yes to possibly more important things. So when I say no to text messages at night, I might be saying yes to my wife and kids. So the truth is you got to remember the word no will help you. Every time you say yes to overload, you are saying no to your family. Every time you say yes to overload, you are saying no to your family. Number 4, learn to confront. And here's what I mean by that. Conflict resolution needs to be a part of your ministry. Don't let things go untouched. So if you have conflict with a leader or with a student or with a parent or with your pastor, deal with it, run through it, walk through it, whatever, get it done, put it behind you, put it in your rearview mirror, and that will help you a whole lot. Learn to confront things. Don't avoid. If you're like me, I hate confrontation. So I really stress. I'm not kidding. I stress over it. I lose sleep over it, things like that. But what I've learned is if I just face it, go through it, I'm way better off than just sitting around and thinking and dwelling about it all the time. So learn to confront things. Number 5, talk to other youth workers. I used to always think the grass is greener at every other church than mine. And that would frustrate me all the time. I'd be like, man, if I had what they had, if I had their youth room, if I had their leaders, if I had their students, if I had this, here's the truth. The grass is not always greener. Learn to talk to other youth pastors and listen to them, listen to their struggles, and you'll find that possibly you have it better than you think. Number 6, have accountable friendships outside of the ministry. Now, this can be other youth pastors in the area or just friends in the community. But you need some friendships who can keep you accountable that are not in your church. The reason why I say that is because it's hard for you to confide about frustrations about your church, possibly your leadership, possibly the leaders in your youth ministry, to someone who has to go to church with those same people, because it will impact and influence the way that they view them. So it's important, have some accountable friendships outside of the ministry. Number 7, find a caring mentor. Listen, you're never too old to be mentored. So I don't care if you're 40 years old, find a seasoned 60, 70-year-old to spend time with you and to mentor you. If you're 25 years old, find a seasoned mentor that you can meet with once a month that can mentor and help you grow and become better than you are right now. Number 8, block out a day off. Now, I served in ministry for about 8 years before I had a day off during the week. And I'm telling you, it has changed the game for me. I'm way less tired. I'm way less stressed. I'm way less frustrated because on my day off, I get to spend time with my family or do something that gets my mind off of work, like play golf or something like that. And it doesn't mean, I used to think, man, if you take a day off, you're lazy. That's not what that means, because half the time I work every Saturday afternoon at the church because we have setup at our church, and I have to work, like Sunday is a long day for us. So we don't get days off. So I think it's important, find a day that can be yours, guard it, and do things that can grow you. If that's read, if that's go to the beach, if that is play golf or play video games or rest and take a nap or all those things. Listen, find something to do, block out a day off on your calendar. Number 9, block out your vacation. Guard it. Have one. Go somewhere with your family. Get away from the community that you serve in. It will help you. Number 10, let your family have input into your youth ministry calendar. So don't just plan everything and then go tell your wife what you have going on or your spouse. Listen, that is going to frustrate you. It'll frustrate them. And so make sure that you spend some time saying, hey, does these dates work for our mission trip? Does these days work for camp? Do this work for this activity we want to do? And allow them to have input in those things. Number 11, ask for a job description and a review from your pastor. Here's why I mean that. Nothing will frustrate you more than not knowing if you're meeting the expectations of the one above you, because it's frustrating to them. And it's frustrating to you if you don't know that, because you think maybe I'm doing good, maybe I'm not. It'll help you if you know and have clear expectations, guidelines of exactly what's expected of you, and that you know that if you're meeting them or not. Number 12, control your time or others will control it for you. Control your time or others will control it for you. Leaders must decide what's important. Listen, if I had a nickel for every time somebody gave me an idea, I'd be filthy rich. But listen, I've had to say no to a lot of good ideas over the years because I feel like we had a better idea. And that's part of being a leader, is you're going to have to learn how to say no and things like that. Not everything is of equal value. So you might have somebody say, hey, I think you guys should go do this on Saturday evening and this on Friday evening and this on Thursday evening and so on. Here's the truth. They might be great things, but you have to control your time, or the church can control all of your time. Number 13, keep track of your time. This is time management. And listen, time management is something that all of you need to go ahead and figure out and get better at right now. If you kept track of your time, I'd be interested to know how much time you spend on Netflix and Hulu and video games and things like that. And listen, there's nothing wrong with those things, and you should be involved in them because they're good for our soul, they're good for our mind, to get our mind off of work. But if you're not careful, you can log on to Facebook and waste 2 hours. And so my point is, you have to manage your time. What I would encourage you to do for an entire week, keep track of every minute of your day, what you did, and then look back at the week, and you will find, it'll probably open your eyes how possibly unproductive we can be. And so make sure that you spend time doing the things that matter. So let's look, letter B, balancing the demands of your time. Number 1, you have to determine your roles. Determine your roles. Here's what I mean by that. Here's some roles on your notes. And these are for me. Some of them might be for you or eventually for you or whatever. But these are my roles that I have to determine and balance in my life. I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian, and I'm a follower of Jesus. So I have to balance living for Him with every other role that I have in my life. I'm a spouse. I'm a husband. And so I have to balance that. I have to spend time with my wife. I have to prioritize her, and I have to balance her with my job. I'm also a parent. So I have 2 children right now. And listen, I have to balance that. My kids need me. They need me to be present in their lives, and I'm going to be. And I will say no to a lot of things in church sometimes that are going to take the time of my time with my family. So I'm a parent. I'm also a friend. All right, I'm a friend to a lot of people. And here's the truth. Because of that, I have to balance those times. We have some close friends that we hang out with, and I have to balance that along with work, along with ministry. I'm also a relative. And so I have parents, I have siblings, I have in-laws. I have all that I have to balance in my life. I also am an owner and an employee. So my point is this. I have all of those things in my life that I have to balance. And you have roles in your life. Being all in on the church does not mean you're all out on your family. No, you have to balance the two. Being all in on the church does not mean that you have to just kind of push away your family and your friends to be all in on your church. No, you need a healthy balance of all of those things. So you have to list your roles, what you have going on, and balance all of them. Number 2, block out your non-negotiables and your weekly meetings. So for instance, if you have weekly meetings that happen every single week, block them out and don't schedule anything in those times. And that's okay, and block out your non-negotiables. Number 3, list your weekly task under your roles. List your weekly task under your roles. Number 4, block out realistic time to complete your task. When you're doing time management, listen, don't block out 30 minutes for sermon prep. No, sermon prep's going to take way longer than that. Block out enough time, realistic time to get what you need done, or you'll always be playing catch up. And then number 5, this is just a principle to help you. Take time to save time. So when you take time to plan your time, you're going to eventually save your time. So hopefully that'll help you handling some pressure. Let's look at this real quickly. Let's look at disciplining positively in youth ministry. I can tell you story after story of issues that we've had with having to discipline students within our ministry. I've had students making out on a van. I've had students, doing all sorts of things. I've had cussing. I've had fights break out when we've been playing sports and stuff like that. I've had all sorts of different things, normal just disruptions even in youth group when I'm preaching and students are just kind of causing issues, things like that. I had one student get dropped off for youth group several years ago, and they had a conflict with somebody. They snuck out and acted like they were going to the restroom and ended up sneaking out of the building, walking down the street, and their parents were wondering where they were when they came to pick them up. My point is this: we have a lot of things happen in youth ministry that you have to discipline and kind of come in and be that leader and authority over them. And discipline can make or break your ministry. If I was to look back at my ministry, I would definitely rethink how I discipline. Sometimes I would come down harshly with anger because I was so irritated with some of these situations that were happening. I forgot the remember at your age principle, and I was putting a high demand, high expectation on some of these students, and I came down on them pretty hard sometimes, and it ruined some relationships that I had with some students. And so if I was to look back, I would have showed a lot more grace, a lot more mercy, and a lot more love during these process. But discipline, it's a part of the ministry. So understand the big picture of discipline. Here it is. Number 1, a biblical perspective of discipline. This will hopefully help you. Discipline is a virtue and a positive promoter of spirituality, morality, and relational integrity. The Bible refers to this as righteousness. So here's my point. Discipline, it's a virtue, and it helps promote morality and spirituality. It's a good thing. If you want integrity, you're going to have to discipline at times. Listen, we find this out in our own lives. Our parents discipline us because they love us and because they want to develop us. Even Jesus, the Bible talks about that he chastises, he disciplines us. Why? So that we can be developed, so that we can be chiseled and conformed into Jesus Christ's image. So my point is this: discipline is a part of that molding process. Letter B, having a strategy for discipline is virtually synonymous with having a strategy for discipleship. They're the same. If you want to disciple kids, you have to discipline kids. All right, it's part of it. Discipleship is from that root word discipline. It's a part of the process of discipleship. Number 2, sociological perspective of discipline. Sociological studies show that the best way to discipline is through a system of high support and high control. So you need control, but you also need to be loving and supportive of your students. Too much support or too much control without the counterbalance of the other can do tremendous damage in a student's life and in your ministry and youth ministry's world. Number 3, a youth ministry perspective on discipline. Then I'll get to some practical things. Letter A, insecure youth workers can miss out on molding young people's lives because their desire to be liked. All right. So insecure youth pastors, here's the truth. They're going to not discipline kids, let them walk all over them, let them have control. And guess what? They're doing it all just to be liked by teenagers, but they might not be molding and discipling lives. The courage to say these things and the love to say them well are the marks of a good leader. So how to balance our boundaries, how to discipline kids. First, you need to expect good behavior. Expect good behavior. Listen, students rise and fall to our levels of expectations. So whatever expectations you place on a student, they're usually going to rise to it, or if it's a low one, they're going to fall to it. So if you have no expectations, they're probably going to hit it every single time. So my point is, you need to expect good behavior. You need to expect, number 2, have a few simple rules. Now, I don't think you should broadcast these all the time. I don't think that they should be listed in your room or anything like that. I don't think that you should have 10 commandments. I don't think you need 50 rules in your youth ministry. I think you need a few simple rules that cover all the major things that happen in youth ministry. Don't waste rules. Students will only follow a few. So if you think you're going to have 30 rules and try to enforce them all, students are only going to follow 3 or 4 of them. So you need a few key rules and narrow those down to a few simple ones. Number 3, you need to state the rules positively and explain their purpose. Don't have rules for the sake of having rules. Students hate that. They get enough of that at school. They get enough of that in their homes. And for you in youth ministry, you just need a few simple rules, and that'll help you. And always explain why they're there. Few things are more irritating than unreasonable rules. All right, so number 4, make consequences appropriate and known ahead of time. For instance, if a kid talks in your sermon and you have to tell them to sit down and you talk to them afterwards, that doesn't mean they can't go to camp the next week. That doesn't mean they're not allowed at youth group. That's way too harsh. That's way too out of line. And so for you, make sure they're reasonable and appropriate. But then also make sure that they're known ahead of time. If you do this, this will happen, and follow through. It will help them. If they do it and you don't follow through, then they have the control, you don't. So it's important that you keep control by stating the rules, having consequences, and making them known ahead of time. It is not fair to surprise students by disciplining them with measures of which they were unaware. So to make sure that they're aware of exactly what's going to happen to them if they do it. Number 5, know the difference between annoying and inappropriate. There is a difference, and you need to know the difference between the two. It's important. So for instance, if a kid at an event comes up with a bucket of water and pours it on you, listen, they're being 15 years old. That doesn't mean you have to kick them out of the youth group. That doesn't mean they were trying to be malicious or anything. They're just being funny and they're acting like 15-year-olds. You need to know the difference between the two, because that will help save you a lot of stress, and you need to be able to laugh in those moments. Number 6, minimize your warnings for behavior. Okay? For misbehavior, Don't tell them no 45 times. Have you ever seen that happen with a parent and a kid in a store? It's like, stop. If you do this, you're going to get a spanking or you're going to get grounded or whatever, and you just say stop, 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 and nothing ever happens, here's the truth. That kid has full control. They have full control. So minimize your warnings for behavior. Repeated warnings that call for control only show that you don't have control. So repeated warnings that are calling for control just show that you really don't have control at all. Number 7, avoid defining students as discipline problems. Have you ever in school said, here comes the discipline kid, or that kid's the bad kid or whatever? Avoid characterizing your students that way. You're going to have those kind of kids. And here's the truth. Just be thankful they're there, love them, support them, and be there for them. But don't define them as they're a discipline problem, especially to your leaders and other students and parents. Number 8, enforce rules without anger. Try to enforce your rules without anger. Don't just yell at them. If you have kids who are breaking the physical policy, don't just yell. Don't just stop everything you're doing and saying, "What are y'all thinking? Don't you know the rules?" That is not the way to handle it. Go to them privately and handle that. Number 9, don't embarrass the students you discipline. One time, this was a mistake I made, but I was driving late at night, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and pretty much everybody on our church van was asleep. And in the back of the van, I could see 2 kids making out in the back of the van, which is a no-no in our youth group. And so I called both of them out. It woke up everybody in the van. I separated them on the spot, and listen, I embarrassed them to no end. And when I look back, that moment shaped the influence that I had with both of them for the rest of their tenure in my youth ministry. And by the way, it wasn't a good influence. They did not really ever look to me, and we never were able to bond or connect much after that moment. And so I look back to that moment. If I'd have handled that a little bit differently, less so of embarrassing them and making a point, I would have probably been able to influence them more after that moment. So that's just me sharing a little bit about my experience, what I've learned. Don't embarrass them. And so, which brings us to number 10. Speak privately to students about their behavior problems. Privately. And so make sure that you speak privately to students, take them off one-on-one. I could have easily stopped the van and possibly at a gas station and had a conversation. I could have just brought one of them to the front just to talk to them and then slowly interjected why I did what I did. And no, I called them out. I said, stop making out in the back. I mean, I was full-fledged. I separated them. I made this huge deal about it. Everyone knew exactly what had happened. So speak privately to them. That's the way to handle it. Number 11, don't be afraid to involve the parents. Remember, you're creating a family ministry, not just to the teens, but to the family. If my kid is making out on the back of a church van, I want to know that. If my kid is disruptive in a youth service, I want to know that. Don't be afraid to involve the parents. Now, if it's something small like, hey, they went to the bathroom and they were trying to stay out of youth group, or they possibly were talking in your sermon, something kind of small, I'm not saying you have to run to their parent every time. I'm telling your parent. No, I'm saying when it gets big, don't be afraid to bring the parent in to help with that discipleship and molding process. And that's kind of the way that God has designed it. So if you have any other questions about disciplining, listen, I've learned a lot about discipline over the years, and I can help you. You can always send me an email, and I would love to be able to connect with you and answer any questions you have about disciplining.